All right, now that we've finished talking about energy flow and how we move elements through it, let's talk about the different types of ecosystems. And the first big group we're going to talk about is terrestrial biomes. So we're going to put all the land into one big group. So what type of biomes do we have? So one way that we characterize each biome is based off temperature. You'll see characteristics like the amount of rain that they get, where they lie on the relative to the equator does play a big role. And there's going to be all kinds of stuff. What's the vegetation do we see right here? This is just a map showing you all the different biomes that we have out there, and we're going to hit on most of them, and I'll point out some key characteristics of each of them. So your first one, and probably one of my favorites, will be the tropical forest, and we also call these the tropical rainforest. Now you're going to find these close to the equator, and this is such an important group because this is going to be the most diverse, but it's also the one that's under the most threat. Now the reason that this is so important to us because we call this nature's pharmacy. We do not realize how much we get from the rainforest. They do a lot of our photosynthesis there. As I said, they're like the lungs of the earth, but there's a lot of medical stuff that we can get and extract from plants. Now, the type of vegetation, you're going to see a lot of evergreen trees with these large leaves. You see a lot of palms and stuff. And they're going to form like a canopy. So they might have constant daylight, but you will see like, areas that aren't like truly exposed to the sun thanks to all the overcover. The range in temperatures is going to be around from 68 to 93 degrees Fahrenheit, and it really doesn't vary because it is at that equator. I can't say that today. So it's really not going to change. It's pretty much always like the same temperature throughout the year. They do get a ton of rain. That's why they're called the rainforest, between 8.2 to 14.8 feet per year, which is great because, this type of vegetation and animals, they thrive in this. Now, they do have a high net primary productivity in this area because these are the perfect conditions for plants to grow. Your next one is your savannas. So these are your grasslands, and you're going to have very few trees in this. I always think of the Lion King for a big one. So you got South America, Africa, and Northern Australia are where you'll find these conditions, or these biomes. Now you're going to find a lot of grasses and herbaceous plants that are able to grow in areas with low rain. Now another thing that this biome is also a threat to is they have a very long dry season and they constantly have fires. So you've been hearing about a lot of Australian fires. It's probably these savannas that are being really impacted. Their temperature can range from 75 to 84 degrees, and they get about 20 to 50 inches of rainfall per year. Next up is your deserts, not your deserts, but deserts. So they're going to be centered on the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Now, when you think of desert, you think of extremely dry, not a lot of humidity in the air because you're going to have a high rate of evaporation. Now with this, it's a very harsh climate and you're going to have very low species diversity. So the plants that survive here are going to be annuals. They're going to have very deep roots so they can get to those water sources, and they're going to have the ability to store water in their stems long term. Animals that do live here are generally going to be nocturnal because that's going to be the cool time of day that they can actually go out. The temperature range on these is intense. You can go from freezing to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, as I mentioned, there is very little rain to these, and we actually have cold deserts out there too. Now, Chaparral, this is known as a scrub forest, and you'll find these mostly in California, along the Mediterranean Sea, and the southern coast of Australia. These are noted for very dry summers, and you're going to see mostly shrubs, not a lot of trees in theirs, and they are also subject to a lot of fire. They only get like a minimal amount of rain for 25 to 30 inches of rain per year. There wasn't a lot of information on this one in the book. Your temperate grasslands, which is what we're probably used to more in this area, we call them prairies up here in North America, or steppes in Eurasia. Now they are noted to having those very hot summers and extremely cold winters. Now, most of the plant growth is going to happen this spring and the summer and then the fall, and then pretty much everything goes dormant during the winter. Now, most often you're going to see vegetation, which will be grasses, but then we have those rivers and streams where you'll see the trees located along. Now this is the prairies, and it's going to have the most fertile soils. This is what we really take advantage when it comes to agriculture. You'll see a lot of this can actually be maintained by fire too in certain areas. And the rainfall can range from 10 to 35 inches per year. Probably one of my favorite, your temperate forest. So this is the most common biome in eastern North America, Western Europe, Eastern Asia, Chile, and New Zealand. Just think of these as a nice, happy little wooded forest where you see Snow White just trucking along. You're going to see deciduous trees. Now, deciduous trees, what they do is they lose their leaves in the fall, which is like what's happening in this area. Now, when it's not fall and it's spring and summer, the leaves do leaf out and shade the ground. But one thing you'll notice that the trees are not as tall as the ones in the rainforest are, even in the evergreen trees, so they're going to be a lot shorter. Now, with that losing of the leaves and stuff, it does add a lot of nutrients to the soil, and which is really rich in organic matter. It has a wide range of temperatures. From the winters, we can go to -22 all the way up to around 86 for the summer. And it has a decent range of rainfall for a year between 30 to 60 inches. Another type of forest is the boreal forest. So these are your taiga, or your coniferous forest. So you're going to see these mostly in the northern areas, and you'll find them in the Arctic Circle, Canada, Alaska, Russia, and northern Europe. These are noted for having the cold winters and short, cool, wet summers. Now, one thing you're going to see is a lot of evergreen coniferous trees. So remember, these are like your pines and all that stuff. They'll be very tall, but they're going to have those needles instead of flat leaves. And that's because they help prevent with water loss, and they're able to, and they will keep those in throughout year round. One thing to notice is when you get to these more harsh environments, you do see a lower species diversities, and they only get between 16 to 39 inches of rain per year. Your last one that the book does mention is the Arctic Tundra. So these are going to be the Arctic areas, are way up in the northern hemisphere. Now, one thing noted about this is where you're going to find permafrost, where the soil is pretty much frozen year-round. It is going to melt some in the summer, creating a soggy soil. So you're going to find a lot of moss in these areas. Now, it does have a very short growing season because it all depends on how the Earth's axis is. So during that time, it will have those days where they have 24 hours of sunlight. But then in the winter, they have where it's pretty much dark all the year round. There's like some... God, she's on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, where a girl talks about how it is to live up in the Arctic Circle where it's dark all the time, or when it's light all the time. It's quite fun. You're going to see some shrubs, but mostly grasses and small flowering plants. Since the conditions are harsh, you're not going to find as much diversity, and there's not going to be very much productivity here. And as I mentioned, the range can vary to -30 in the winter, up to 50 in the summer. So not much review on this one, and here's credit for the images.